Virginia Hall, also known as the Limping Lady, was an American spy and resistance fighter who helped win World War II. Before she became the most elusive enemy of the Gestapo, before the Nazis came to fear her so much they called her La Dame Cabote, the Limping Lady, Virginia Hall was just another determined young woman chasing a dream that always seemed just out of reach. In the summer of 1931, the air in Warsaw was thick with tension. Europe trembled beneath the weight of old empires and new ideologies. But inside the hushed halls of the U.S. Embassy, Virginia Hall moved with quiet precision, filing reports, translating communiques, and studying every flicker of the continent's unraveling order. She was just a consular clerk, yet already her sharp mind and unflinching resolve set her apart. So sit tight as we dive into today's mystery, and you will have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. Virginia had ambitions that didn't fit the expectations of her time or her gender. Twice she had taken the grueling U.S. Foreign Service exam. Twice she had failed. Most would have stopped there, but not Virginia. Instead, she packed her bags and stepped into the unknown, determined to learn diplomacy not from textbooks, but from the heartbeat of the world itself. Her journey took her from the gray chill of Poland to the sun-drenched port city of Smyrna, Turkey, where ancient ruins kissed the Aegean Sea and whispers of war stirred across the water. In Smyrna, she thrived, restless, curious, fearless. She rode horses across rugged hills, hunted game in the brush, and lost herself in the thrill of exploration. But on a cold December day in 1933, her life changed forever. She was crossing a fence during a solo hunting trip when it happened, an accidental misfire. Her shotgun exploded downward, tearing into her left foot. Alone and bleeding, she dragged herself toward help. Colleagues rushed her to a local hospital, but the infection had already begun its cruel work. Gangrene crept up her leg like a shadow, and by the time the American doctor arrived, there was only one option left. He took her leg below the knee. Virginia didn't cry. She didn't beg. She endured. By January, she had been transferred to the American hospital in Istanbul, where the nurses learned quickly that their newest patient was not like the others. She asked questions about everything, tried to stand before the swelling had even gone down, and refused to be pitied. By February, she was strong enough to travel home to Baltimore, where a prosthetic limb awaited her. A heavy, clunky thing of wood and steel. Most would have seen an ending in that hospital bed. But Virginia Hall named her new leg Cuthbert, and with a wry smile and a clenched jaw, she began the long, painful process of learning to walk all over again. Not because she had to, but because she intended to run. By September 1934, less than a year after losing her leg, Virginia Hall was already setting her sights on the next challenge. The letter she sent to the U.S. The Department of State was crisp and formal, typical of diplomatic correspondence. But behind the precise wording pulsed the urgency of a woman determined not to be forgotten. She listed 3 preferred postings: Spain, Estonia, and Peru. Why Tallinn, the capital of a quiet Baltic republic, had made the top of her list remains a mystery. But to those in foreign service circles, Estonia had already gained a modest reputation. Charming, peaceful, and most importantly, comfortable. Perhaps Virginia thought she could recover there in more ways than one. The State Department had other plans. There were no vacancies in her chosen posts. Instead, she was sent to Venice, Italy, a city of masks and mirrored waters, where beauty floated just above decay. It was December 1934 when she resumed work, her prosthetic leg clicking softly beneath her skirts as she stepped once more into the world she loved. But the dream hadn't died. Beneath the professional decorum, she still burned with ambition. She wanted more than clerical work. She wanted to serve. Again, she applied to take the Foreign Service exam, a 3rd attempt. This time, she believed she had enough experience, enough resilience, enough merit. Then the letter came. It was blunt, bureaucratic, and final. The Department of State regretted informing Miss Hall that she was no longer eligible to join the Foreign Service. The reason? She was not able-bodied. Her amputation, the letter explained coldly, is a cause for rejection, and it would not be possible for Miss Hall to qualify for entry into the service under these regulations. For a long moment, she sat in silence, the letter trembling in her hands, not because of her leg, not because she had failed, but because she had been dismissed not for lack of talent or drive, but because of a missing limb. She appealed the decision, but her voice, for all its strength, fell into the void of a rigid institution. And so, when another quiet posting opened up in the U.S. legation in Tallinn, Estonia, she took it, not out of hope, but as a stepping stone to somewhere else. In June 1938, she arrived in the Baltic capital, a city of cobblestone streets and medieval spires, where the chill in the air foretold a storm yet to come. Under the watchful eyes of U.S. Consul Walter A. Leonard and Vice Consul Montgomery H. Colliday, Virginia performed her duties with the same calm precision she always had. She was present on November 24th when U.S. Envoy John C. Wiley presented his credentials to the Estonian head of state, Konstantin Pats, but as a clerk, she was not allowed to attend. Still, Virginia hadn't given up entirely. From her modest office, she typed out one final appeal, addressed directly to Assistant Secretary of State G. Howland Shaw. She requested a waiver, one last shot to prove that ability wasn't always visible. The answer came back, just as cold and final as the last. No, that was the end. At least of that chapter. Tallinn was peaceful, almost too peaceful. But for a woman like Virginia Hall, peace was its own prison. She had survived gunfire, amputation, and a system that refused to see her. But she wasn't built for paperwork and polite irrelevance. In May 1939, she packed her things. Her resignation was brief and unemotional. She left Estonia without fanfare, her eyes fixed west, toward Paris, toward uncertainty, toward a Europe on the edge of ruin. She wasn't sure what she'd find in France, but she knew what she was leaving behind. A world that couldn't see past what she'd lost. In the chaos that was coming, she would find a world that finally saw what she could give. Long before she was known as the Limping Lady or the most dangerous of all Allied spies, Virginia Hall was simply Dindy, a spirited, sharp-witted girl from Baltimore, Maryland. Born on April 6, 1906, she was the youngest child of Edwin Lee Hall, a banker with a restless soul, and Barbara Virginia Hamill, a woman with the iron will of old Southern stock. From a young age, Virginia stood apart. Not in defiance, though that would come later, but in presence. There was a confidence in her stride, even before she could spell the word. Her father, a romantic at heart, once stowed away on his father's clipper ship as a child. It was a story Virginia never tired of hearing, and perhaps it planted something in her. A hunger for distant shores, for the thrill of risk. By the time she was 3, she had already crossed the Atlantic on a family trip to Europe. It would be the first of many crossings, and by adulthood, Europe felt more like a second home than a foreign land. She graduated from Roland Park Country Day School with honors, starred in drama productions, edited the school newspaper, and served as class president. She was ambitious, bright, and unafraid to lead. From 1924 to 1926, she studied at Radcliffe College before transferring to Barnard, where she further cultivated her love for politics, literature, and languages. Later, at the American University in Washington, D.C., she dived into graduate studies with the same tenacity that would one day carry her behind enemy lines. But her education didn't end in the U.S. She studied political science in Paris at the École des Sciences Politiques, trained at the Consular Academy in Vienna, and dabbled in courses in Strasbourg, Grenoble, and Toulouse. She learned fluent French and German, not just the grammar and vocabulary, but the cadence, the culture, the subtleties. Though a trace of her American accent lingered, it would never give her away. Despite the setbacks in her foreign service career, Virginia didn't retreat. She recalibrated. In the summer of 1939, as the skies over Europe darkened and the world stood on the brink of war, she was in Paris, trying to stitch together a new path. Her dream of serving as a diplomat had been denied, but perhaps destiny had something less conventional in mind. On September 1st, Hitler invaded Poland. 2 days later, France declared war on Germany. Virginia didn't hesitate. With echoes of Hemingway in her mind, she enlisted as a private in the Services Sanitaires de l'Armée, the French ambulance corps. While much of the Western world waited during the so-called drôle de guerre, the phony war, Virginia trained in battlefield triage and emergency evacuation. Her job? Driving wounded soldiers from the front lines to makeshift hospitals. It was grueling, dangerous work made harder by her wooden leg. Yet she never complained. Then came May 10, 1940. The Germans struck with brutal efficiency, launching their blitzkrieg. France buckled under the weight of tanks and fire. From then until the fall of Paris on June 14th, Virginia worked around the clock, guiding her ambulance through shattered villages and strafed roadways. She was exhausted, shell-shocked, and nearly always in pain, but she refused to stop. And when France surrendered to the Nazis on June 22nd, she found herself in a land she no longer recognized. German boots marched through French streets. The persecution of Jews had begun in earnest. The collaborators crawled from the shadows. Everything Virginia believed in, freedom, dignity, justice, was under siege. But unlike many, she didn't flee in panic. She calculated. Armed with her American passport, she slipped out of occupied France through the Pyrenees into neutral Spain, and, by August 1940, arrived in London. She was exhausted. She was limping, but she was ready. England was at war, and Virginia Hall was about to offer them something they didn't yet realize they desperately needed. When Virginia Hall walked into the U.S. Embassy in London in 1940, she was a war-weary American with a limp and a past she didn't yet know was legendary. The diplomats asked their questions. She answered coolly, methodically, recounting the fall of France with the precision of a reporter and the insight of someone who had bled beside it. Her bravery was evident, but she didn't want a desk. She wasn't interested in clerical work. The bombs rained over London that autumn in the Blitz, the Luftwaffe's fire falling night after night. Virginia never flinched. She had already survived the thunder of war. She wasn't looking to be protected. She was looking for a way back in. On February 26, 1941, she made a quiet exit, resigned from her role at the U.S. Embassy. Her official reason? Seeking other employment. The truth? She had been recruited into one of Britain's most secretive and elite wartime organizations, the Special Operations Executive, or SOE. Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Their mission? Sabotage, espionage, subversion. Virginia's training was brutal. Tested everything, her endurance, her nerves, her ability to kill. She passed. Not easily, but decisively. And by April, she was officially an SOE agent. She spent that summer plotting a return to France. On August 23, 1941, under the cover of a new identity, Brigitte Lecontre, a French-American correspondent for the New York Post, Virginia slipped back into the shadows of Vichy France. Her SOE codename was Germaine. Her cover, flawless. Her courage, unmatched. For the next 15 months, she became the nerve center of resistance in Lyon. She did everything. She rescued downed Allied pilots and guided them to safety. She coordinated arms drops under moonlit skies for the French resistance. She orchestrated sabotage missions that crippled German supply lines. She engineered prison escapes under the noses of Vichy guards. She built networks, trained new agents, and became a myth among the underground. The Vichy police wanted her. The Gestapo wanted her more. They didn't know her name, but they gave her one. La Dame Caboite, the lady with the limp. She was a ghost, uncatchable, untraceable, but their net was tightening. Then, everything changed. In November 1942, after Allied forces landed in North Africa, Germany fully occupied France. Vichy's flimsy autonomy was dissolved. The monster arrived in Lyon, Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon. Sadist, war criminal, Gestapo chief. Barbie launched a manhunt. Posters were printed. Rewards were offered. And Virginia Hall, now codenamed Artemis by the Nazis, was enemy number one. Barbie reportedly told his agents, "I would give anything to lay my hands on that Canadian bitch." But Virginia was already on the move. In the freezing grip of winter, dragging her wooden leg over ice and rock, she hiked across the Pyrenees into Spain. Alone, in pain and hunted, the Spanish border guards arrested her for not having proper papers. 20 days in prison. But she made it out. By Christmas 1942, she was back in London and hailed a hero. But Virginia didn't want parades. She wanted back in. The SOE refused. She was too recognizable, too valuable, too hunted. So she found someone who would take her. The Americans. On March 10, 1944, Virginia Hall joined the U.S. Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, America's wartime spy agency. They gave her a new code name, Diane. 3 weeks later, under a veil of night, a wooden boat slipped along the coast of Brittany. A rubber dinghy met the shore. From it stepped an old woman, hunched, gray-haired, inconspicuous. It was Virginia. She set up in the village of Maydew, then later in Kosny. She became the lifeline of resistance, gathering intel, sending radio transmissions, dodging Gestapo radio detection vans. One misstep could mean capture and torture, but Virginia never flinched. By June 6, 1944, D-Day, her resistance network was ready. They blew up railway lines, sabotaged convoys, ambushed Nazi patrols. They sowed chaos from the inside while Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy. Then again in the south, as the Allies landed on August 16th. Virginia and her fighters turned guerrilla resistance into open warfare. On August 26, 1944, they accepted the surrender of the German Southern Command at Luchambon. One woman with a wooden leg had brought an empire to its knees in that region. But Virginia wasn't finished. On September 4th, she coordinated another supply drop. Among the men parachuting in was a French-American lieutenant named Paul Goylet. He was charming, sharp, brave, and smitten. The feeling was mutual, but romance would have to wait. On September 13th, they left Kosny in search of the next battle. They reached newly liberated Paris by the 25th. Their mission complete, the OSS pulled them out. But with the Battle of the Bulge looming, the war was far from over. So they volunteered again. By April 1945, Virginia's OSS team was positioned in Switzerland, preparing to infiltrate Nazi-controlled Austria. But on May 2nd, the mission was cancelled. 6 days later, Germany surrendered. The war in Europe was over. But Virginia Hall's legend had only just begun. In the decades following her death, Virginia Hall's legacy only grew stronger. Though she had once operated in complete secrecy, the story of the lady with the limp eventually emerged from the classified shadows. Historians, intelligence professionals, and journalists began to uncover the remarkable truth of her contributions, not only as one of the most effective Allied spies of World War II, but also as a pioneering woman in the male-dominated world of espionage. In 2006, nearly a quarter century after her death, the CIA recognized Virginia's extraordinary service by naming a building after her at their Langley, Virginia headquarters. It was a rare and symbolic gesture, underscoring her lasting influence on American intelligence operations. Her wooden prosthetic leg, which she had affectionately named Cuthbert, was also displayed at the CIA Museum as a testament to her courage and resilience. Virginia's story began receiving wider public attention in the 21st century. Biographies like The Wolves at the Door by Judith L. Pearson and A Woman of No Importance by Sonia Purnell brought her exploits to light for a new generation. These works not only celebrated her bravery, but also shed light on the systemic barriers she faced: discrimination, ableism, and the gender norms of the time, which she overcame with unrelenting determination. Virginia Hall's story has since been the subject of documentaries, museum exhibits, and even proposals for feature films. Schools and military academies now include her in lessons on espionage and heroism, and her name is invoked in discussions about women in intelligence and national defense. She has become a role model for aspiring intelligence officers, especially women and people with disabilities. In 2019, the U.S. Department of Defense included Virginia in their official list of Heroes of Military Intelligence. She is now honored alongside figures who were once her secret contemporaries, and her once shadowy presence has taken on an iconic status in the history of covert operations. Virginia Hall's life is not just a war story. It's a story about identity, persistence, and purpose. She proved that no obstacle, be it physical disability or systemic bias, could stop a determined individual from making history. Her story reminds us that true heroism often lies in quiet resistance, unseen sacrifices, and an unshakable commitment to doing what is right, even when the odds are impossible. Though she spent much of her life hidden behind false identities, today Virginia Hall stands tall as one of the most remarkable figures of the 20th century. Her courage helped turn the tide of war. Her legacy continues to inspire generations. Etched in the memory of history and engraved in the secret corridors of intelligence, Virginia Hall's story is proof that even in the darkest hours, one determined voice, one unyielding spirit, can change the course of the world. Feel free to leave your comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more mysteries like this. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.